All right. So it's been live the whole time, so I apologize. Okay. We just didn't see it. For those of you watching on YouTube, we had a little technical error in here. So I'll go ahead and start the Technology Committee meeting for this morning. We have three bills today. On the first bill I would like to call up is 2426 and recognize Chairman Williams for his explanation of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. This bill is, we're calling it AIR. It's the Artificial Intelligence Regulation Task Force. Spent a lot of time going around the country this last year learning about AI, what we can about it. Obviously, it's transformational. It's coming in a big way. This task force, a couple things I want to note about it. It sunsets in 27. This is not something we're putting out there for eternity. We think by then we'll have our minds wrapped around legislatively at least what we need to do, and it can always be extended or reformatted if we need to do it in a different way. Simply put, as we've gone around the country, we don't see a lot of areas we need to do legislation at this point. I think there's some intellectual property that we need talking about, deep fakes we're talking about. We've got some models working out there in legislation today, but we need to learn. And what we've done is I want to kind of quickly go through. We've got 7 members on the board. We looked at bills from all across the country and kind of settled on a model similar to what Georgia did. We actually met the author of that bill. They spent tons of time with their AI bill. They'd had 8 sub-meetings with different industries to talk about AIs and its effect. And they're actually mentioned in this bill that you talk about, like workforce development, elementary education, IHL, community college, and all these will be there. So we felt with a smaller, agile board of directors that we can be more strategic and surgical on specific places. And the intent would be to have meetings in those specific areas and in different industries. And as other things come up, the term we've been kind of throwing around this year, sandbox. This will give us the parameters to get inside this committee and kind of work things, build a sandbox, tear it down, rebuild it. And in technology, that's the thing that happens a lot. So I think this committee will allow us, this task force will allow us to do that. With that, I can talk about it all day, but we go to session in a minute. So I'm going to yield for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from the committee? All right, so I do have a question. The governor has put out an EO a couple of months ago that addresses some of this stuff. How do you see this committee moving forward, or the study committee working with within the governor's EO?
Thank you very much for mentioning that, and I failed to mention that. I think this will complement the governor's leadership in the EO that he issued a few weeks ago. The intent is for us all to kind of work in tandem as we go forward. From the standpoint of the governor doing the EO, having ITS go ahead and do the inventory and those things, we come right behind that and complement that. ITS director, as his designee, is going to be on this board in lockstep as we go down this path, as they are on the cyber board we created last year. So again, this is something that will fall in line with the governor's leadership and going forward, and we'll work in tandem and hopefully have beneficial conversations as we go and as the technology continues to develop.
Okay, I know one of the major concerns that the public has about this is the ethical use of AI. Also, the protection of publicly identifiable information. And I know that I've read this and that's in there. But will you speak to that quickly about what the task force will be looking for, and then what recommendations would we expect to see from a report from them?
Yes, data privacy in all the forms you just mentioned is top of mind. As we go forward with this technology, and we've got AI models, and you throw things in that, as we talk about legislation now, we're using different AI models to help us craft legislation, is protecting that. And I don't know if I'm going to say the word right, making the data anonymous. As we look forward with other bills that are circulating the Senate and trying to have all our agencies have the data where it can be shared from one agency to another, HIPAA compliance and all these things that are already out there, we've got to be able to make the data anonymous, but able to use the data in these models. So that is top of mind. Ethical considerations, bias, these are the top things that are done. These models, we've got to make sure that they're as objective and unbiased as they can be. So that's obviously at the top of mind now as we go forward. And as I think this thing evolves, we'll be having a conversation in 6 months different than the one today, because the models will come out and be doing something different.
Okay. And is there anything in here specifically towards the procurement for AI, or recommendations on how to best procure this with use within state agencies?
There is not anything specifically that speaks to procurement, with the exception of if the committee of the task force decides they want to spend some time on procurement and make recommendations, that's within their purview to do that. Again, they're doing research and making recommendations that speaks to policy. That's the intention of this as we go forward. I predict over the next couple of sessions, there'll be more and more AI legislation each year. Many states are doing a lot of things this year. We're doing some things, again, the things I think that are essential, different people in the Senate and the House, but we're not going crazy with it. We need to put guardrails where they're needed. This will allow us to do that. And procurement obviously being in that conversation.
Yeah, and this is promoting innovation within state agencies and not stifling innovation, correct?
Absolutely. The intent is for it to promote it. That's why we don't want to go down with regulation. As we have the national conversations about the AI war with China, I mean, we don't want to overregulate. The Europeans have done that already, and there's a lot of concerns with that. Colorado's got a bill out there, the California bill that was vetoed. We don't want to be guilty of that, but putting smart people in the room, having the conversations again and again, I think allows us to form regulation that is proactive to industry, at the same time protecting our citizens. That's got to be top of mind. As you can see with all the technology and all the workforce that's happened in the last few months that are coming to our state, as I mentioned, as I started this journey, I said, we're going to become a tech destination. No, we are a tech destination. And I think we're doing a great job at leading in a lot of ways. Maine, which will sit on this board, Colin Napier, the leader of that's done a phenomenal job from a workforce standpoint. And we lead the nation in that. We're having people from California saying, what are you doing? So we definitely don't want to stifle that. Again, we want to compliment the governor's leadership with what MDA is doing, because I suspect there are a lot of more things coming in that area.
Right. You've worked a lot on this. Well, first of all, are there any other questions? So I just want to tell you, thank you again for the effort that you put forward this summer to get to this bill. You did an incredible job as chairman of this committee and bringing this forward to us. This is a lot of work. I know you worked with the governor's office directly on this issue as well, and we continue to work with the governor's office on
Absolutely.
this. So thank you for your leadership in those efforts. Do you have a motion? Okay, motion still sufficient to pass. Any other questions? We have a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Senate Bill 2834. This came to me at the very at the last minute for drafting deadlines. It amends two code sections, and it says in two places that the Department of Information Technology may not enter into a contract with the business unless the contract contains a written verification the business entity does not own or operate substantially funded or facility or research entities whose primary purpose is software development or artificial intelligence research and development present in mainland China or the Bureau of Industry and Security, sanctioned countries. Committee. Yeah. Oh, actually, okay, apologize. It's in multiple code sections that's there. I'm going to tell the committee this. I'm not 100% certain that we need this legislation. But there are some concerns that I'm aware of that I need to do some additional vetting on. I will not take, if this bill were to pass, I will not take this up unless I come back to each one of us on the committee and talk to us about this to find out where it is. Right now, I'm leaning against it, but for the purpose of our deadline today, I'm going to ask that the committee give me a little leniency here in this particular bill and let me work through this a little bit more, get on the calendar and see if it's something that we need to address. And like I said, we'll come back in and have a conversation about it before anything comes up on the floor. So with that being said, can I ask for a motion? All right, motion to pass. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll go to the next one. 2835 for the 475 or 475th time. We're going to try to do something about NG 911 to help our counties out and to help some local municipalities. I have a committee sub that I just got this morning. This has been revised multiple times over the last 30 days. I want to appreciate or give thanks to MEMA and especially director for help in this effort. Also, the other technology companies and the service providers that have provided input. Give you a quick overview. Federal government has set forth guidelines for NG 911. That is next generation 911 that all emergency communications districts must comply with in the future. They haven't set a hard date on it, but there are dates that are already coming up where we have to comply as a state. Several years ago, there was money that was made available from the federal government to help with these planning efforts, and we were fortunate enough that we were able to draw down some of that money. However, we have missed out on a couple of rounds of additional dollars because we do not have a state agency in code section that is designated as an NG 911 coordinator for the state. So one of the requirements was that by the feds is that we had to have that. In this bill, it names MEMA as the coordinator for the state. The other thing that this does, and this is this is a big rip out. It rips out code sections in 1905 and everything that's contained within emergency communications and basically rewrites it. And those of you that have been familiar with this, you know that that code section has been cobbled together over a number of years, and it never really read consistent with any common practice. We just added things on as we normally do in legislative process. So as technology changed, we went from landlines to deal with cell phones, deal with voice over IP, to deal with prepaid wireless. And all of this was done, and it never made any sense, and there was no way for us to account for it. So in trying to get to a better accountability model, I've brought forward this, that the first 9 sections, or the first 8 sections in this bill deals with state issues where we establish a board of advisors from MEMA, which I'll get into in a second. And then we talk about the structure of the board, what they do, what their duties are. Then we tell DOR and direct DOR to accept all of the fees and the emergency communication service fees from service providers, and then what to do with that money. And this actually benefits the counties more than anybody. In the code section, or the section in this bill that deals with counties, is technically or really just one code or one section, and that's section 9. And we've made this super simple for the counties and municipalities to understand how the money is going to flow. And I'll explain that in one second. And then the rest of the code sections that are thereafter are really conforming code sections that we've had to do to make some changes to MEMA's authority to, like I said, name them as the coordinator. But this is very complex. There is a reverse repealer that's in this bill because we will continue to work through this to tweak things here and there. The language that's actually in this bill, most of it came from either Georgia or Arkansas, because those have 2 of the more recognized NG 911 implementation legislations that actually a lot of other states have used. And this is something similar. This is being patterned after those states because a lot of the same telecom companies or the service providers, as you will see in this bill, operate in those states. And what we were wanting to do is we're wanting to make it where we are identical to what other states have done. There are some services that some telecom or service providers, as in this bill, that are providing services that are a little bit different than what's in here. And I've asked for additional information from them to find out how they operate and comply in Arkansas and in Georgia. And I open that up to anybody else. I want to get more information on this. But as we go through this process, I just wanted y'all to be able to have some idea of where we're going and what we're going to be working on. And I've gave I did a I didn't do this. Corbin actually did it. I did a very crude flow chart of how the money flows. So every service provider, no matter if it's landline, voice over IP, cell phones, or prepaid wireless, now will remit all of their fee to one place, and that is to to DOR. Currently, um, it's all over the board. Each branch or each division has its own way of reporting. Some of it goes to the state, some of it goes directly to the county. We changed that. We've also changed the fee in here to go from right now it's all over the place. It's $1, it's $2, it's so many lines for commercial, this, that, and the other. We've streamlined that also to be consistent with some of our other partners, states around us, and that's $2 for everything across the board: landline, cell phone, voice over IP, and the such. So everything will be at a flat rate, $2 that comes into DOR, and it comes in as the Emergency Communications Service Fund. And that money goes into DOR. It's collected. Information is also remitted from the providers that tells where the money came from by zip code. So they will be able to, that way we'll be able to get the money back down to the local emergency communications districts as from where it came from where the actual billing came from. So that's very important piece. There's also a between the board, and which you can see on here, between the board and DOR is a contract or a memorandum of understanding that tells DOR and authorizes DOR to transmit the money down to the locals. Okay, so the service fee that comes in, there's a 7%, no more than 7% is taken off the top of that, and that stays at the state level for state activities or for state NG 911 implementation plans. Okay, that also handles and covers the administrative cost and operating cost for MEMA. Okay, and I'll get into that 7% here in just one second. The rest of the money, the 93% less, I think there's a little bit, I think we did a 0.5% to DOR for collection fees and stuff like that. But the rest of the money goes, 100% of it goes directly to the counties. So we're not keeping it at the state level. We're providing all of the money directly to the counties. However, in section 9 in this committee sub, I want to make sure that it is still section 9, that has not changed. Yes. Yes, it's line 778 on page 32. So we give authority to the counties to spend that money, and we do it in two subsections. The first subsection says that no less than 30% of the money that the county receives has to go into an NG9 or an ECD NG 911 implementation fund. That implementation fund is reserved for capital expenditures. So capital expenditures that are capital in nature. That's for the construction, for the planning, the construction, the implementation, the equipment that has to go in to provide this, everything that's included. I'll tell you, and I think those counties that have worked on this and have understand this more, that 30% is a low number. They're going to have to spend more money than that. But in this bill, all that we're doing is we're saying that you have to segregate that 30% out, and you cannot spend it for any reoccurring cost like salaries or operating expenses. The balance of the money, the other 70% or thereby 70% goes to the county for them to spend on anything to do with emergency communications services, providing emergency communication services. And that's the limits or the extent of the limits that we have in the bill. And again, that's in paragraph 2 under section 9. The other thing is on, so the state has to through MEMA as the executive director of this authority. MEMA and the executive director will hire a director of the Mississippi Emergency Communications Authority. The authority will be and MEMA will be the final say for all or every administrative or executive branch decision that's made. There's an advisory board that's made up on here, and from the advisory board, there are a total of 13 people. One of them are designated as the state person, and that is someone from DPS. Everybody else more than likely will come from a county or a municipality, a local non-state government entity. The purpose for this is that this is grassroots level for developing all of the standard operating procedures for the NG 911 plan, not only the state plan, but the requirements that the locals are going to have to meet. We do not want to portray this or this to be portrayed as the state trying to force the counties to do something that they don't want to do. This is something that they're going to have to do for federal compliance, and it even is tied to their FCC use of bandwidth. So there's a lot of things that are in play right now, but all we're trying to do is to provide the fabric, if you will, for them to decide how this NG 911 plan is going to look for the state. And there will be cost associated with the state's implementation of these plans. There's a lot of things that are, just for example, GIS mapping is going to be a very costly expense for the state to have one GIS map that is geo-referenced, the same in DeSoto County as it is in Harrison County. This is always an issue, and there's going to be some expense that's associated with that. There's a lot of security needs that we have to deal with when we're talking about NG 911 and the networks that it runs over. There's going to be some efficiencies of scale for the state to provide some of that through some of their vehicles. So that 7% that I talked about earlier, some of that money can be used for those types of expenses that the board makes a recommendation to the executive director. So it's the board that's going to be making their budget recommendations for the overall committee or for the overall authority. And then any implementation of those or utilization of those dollars will be approved and authorized by the board of the entire authority. That's what I should say. So understand that we're trying to help the counties with this. We're trying to do everything that they can. And they may come back to us and say the recommendation may be that it may need to be 9%, but that's up to them, and they'll make that decision. I've also tried to draft this bill so that we know we'll have technical amendments in the future, and I've tried to do it so to be as simple as possible for us to be able to come in and make tweaks and not have to bring everything all up again. So just a simple technical bill would be able to work through this. So once the state has their statewide NG 911 plan established, then they will set out guidelines for the locals to follow in developing their own ECD guideline plans. Or NG 911 implementation plans. So that is where the locals get to then figure out what's best for them at their level. They also get to decide what their ECD or their emergency communication district actually looks like in geography. The geography of the district may be contained wholly within one county, or you may have an ECD that services one county plus another county or plus a couple of other counties, and those can be done by either collapsing the ECD, or they may be done through an MOU with operations. And remember, what we're doing here is we're bringing a technology in, and that one day, not too distant future, if there is a storm event in Harrison County, for example, and we lose communications with our dispatch and with our public safety answering points, that there will automatically be a fail-safe that it will go to DeSoto County, and all call routing for Harrison County will actually take place in Harrison County. It's a seamless transition. And I know this sounds scary, but actually those calls can be routed to Oklahoma and still be able to get to our local dispatch. That's that's the purpose of this network and the way that it's set up. And it's incredibly advanced, but it's here and it's already happening across the country. I think that is a decent, detailed, but there's a lot. This is very complex. I know you're going to get a lot of questions from your counties. You're going to get a lot of questions from your supervisors, your sheriffs. Please, I want to make sure that everyone knows that we're open for trying to make sure that there's not any unintended consequences here, and we're trying to address these issues. We want accountability from the fee intake side, as well as accountability on how the money is spent, and so that we know that the money that it goes into public safety communications is going to be spent on public safety communications. So that being said, I will yield for any questions. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you alluded a moment ago to me spending a lot of time on AI, I did, but it pales in comparison to what I've seen you spend the last 5 years on this bill. It is an imperative thing that we need to do. You said this, just my simple mind. Number one, not today, but federal mandate's coming, correct?
It's already here. Some of those mandates have already been issued, and we've been able to comply with some of those requirements because of the functionality and the capabilities of our statewide interoperable radio system through MISWIN. So that was one of the first steps, but there's continued benchmarks that we're going to have to meet, and we're behind.
And this NG 911 bill is where we have to land. It's the landing spot at some point. And by not having done this already, we have missed some dollars.
That's correct.
And if we do this, there's dollars we may be able to pick up.
Going forward, I don't
Yes,
know if we'll be able to recapture.
No, not retroactive, but going forward, if we pass this year and it goes out, assumably there's some federal dollars that we'll be able to get that we wouldn't get if we don't pass this, correct?
That's correct.
At really having a company that is in this space a little bit, at least from a contributor to the PSAPs in a sense, I've always thought our number one job was public safety. And I think this speaks to that in bounds. Number one, our first responders with an NG 911 system will be safer when they go out and respond. And I think we're on the precipice of other technologies coming out that really sound sci-fi today, but with an NG 911 foundational backbone in the state, we'll be able to implement those technologies quicker. And also, ultimately, our citizens will be safer with this. You did kind of speak to consolidation, and I think it encourages that. Is that correct?
That's correct. NG 911 encourages that. What we do here is just make it easier for the counties to do that on their own.
But counties are not mandated to do anything.
That is correct.
911 centers, I kind of thought would be a holy place for a lot of places because they didn't want to give that up. I polled my district. Octavia County has really an NG 911 now. I think the other counties that I serve are a little bit smaller, and I think they would be willing to look at that consolidation issue. So I think we've got about 140, 150 PSAPs, public service access points. Consolidating those, I think, gives us a better deliverable product for our people, and I think this bill would let us do that as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
This is a great bill.
Okay. One other thing that I need to point out to you, because you're going to get questions about this, is regarding the CMRS funds that have accrued over the years. And let me address that real quick. In this code, or in this bill towards the back, there's a lot of code sections that are repealed, and that includes the code section that CMRS is established, and the fees that are collected from CMRS services are divided between the CMRS fund and the locals. That is repealed. The money doesn't go anywhere. The money stays there in this bill, and there are a couple of places, and it's part of Section 3. It speaks to a ECD CMRS grant program, grant fund. And one of the first tasks that the authority is going to have is to develop a grant program for locals who adopt this to submit a plan that's consistent with the NG 911 standards and be scored. The scoring process is going to be enhanced for those that are integrating, that are doing things that are consistent with best practices within the national models that they figure out, that they determine. And what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to have a grant program established, and then make a report back to us, back to the legislature before the end of this year. We may need to work on those timelines depending upon some additional federal guidelines that are coming out. But I do not anticipate having there is no money in this bill. There's no transfer of money. It just creates the fund. It's a landing zone for a transfer bill at some point in time to move all or part of CMRS funds into emergency communications, that 100% of it would go down to the county. So I did need to speak to that. There is no moving of the money. I have had some conversations with a couple of early adopters of NG 911 at the county level that are providing and hosting services for other counties and other districts that are ready to move forward. And there may be a discussion of do we put a little bit of money in here this fiscal or this session and then come in and address the majority of it after we've had an opportunity to digest the overall concept of a grant program. So I apologize for not providing that in there. Any other questions?
Yes, friendly question, Mr. Chairman. Number one, I want to commend you on a remarkable job. Number two, are these matching funds, federal funds, or just funds that are in a grant, so to say?
No, most of them are grant funds. There will be some that are, I would expect that there's going to be some matching funds, but what we're doing here is setting the framework for us to take any funds that we're able to find. And again, it's just, we're giving the locals the opportunity to at least apply for that.
Okay.
Right now, they're unable to do that.
Okay. My second question was the technology aspect of it and the bandwidth, being that some areas are not upgraded with proper bandwidth to be able to sustain maybe this movement that do we have a plan or something to, I guess, bring those other counties up to par so that we're able to communicate and integrate the circuit the way you?
Yeah, so we do have a state network that in a state contract for data that we have within the state that most answering points, public safety answering points or dispatches have currently. But I talked about the cost for implementation and why I wanted to segregate those capital costs. The cost of build out for the infrastructure is a significant number for many counties.
Okay.
And to the point that they're like we've talked about, the counties that have actually looked at this already, they've said, we'll contract with someone else to do this. So that's part of that, but all of those considerations will go into not just the decision-making process for their local plan, but it's going to go into the locations of PSAPs, the proper locations for PSAPs, and whether they will be able to use existing facilities or they will have to relocate to comply with the requirements and to be able to handle the new technology and the applications that will be riding within those IP connections that will come into those PSAPs. So those are all considerations that the locals are going to have to take.
Okay. Last question. I heard you mention grassroots efforts. With those counties that are implementing these plans successfully, will we be able to mimic that and share that information with others?
That's exactly the reason why we wanted to have this authority, is that authority is going to be able to distill the best practices from around the state. And it will also help our locals who are wanting to contract with another PSAP or another ECD to provide those services. It's going to give some kind of framework or at least an open discussion on how that billing should occur. Right now, it's just hodgepodge all over the place, and we can bring some sensibility and some stability to how that is done, some standardization, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In section 3, where it talks about either it's F and H, investing funds or depositing funds in the interest-bearing accounts, is that one individual who will make that decision, or is that a collective?
Hold on one second. What page are you looking at?
Forward line 451. Page 18.
If I'm not mistaken, this is powers of the authority. So it would be for the authority. Ultimately, I mean, the authority is made up of a director from MEMA and then the advisory board from the locals. In this particular section, if I'm not mistaken, this is talking about infrastructure that would have to be purchased. It could be bonded, whatever that case may be, but that would be made at the local level or at the authority level.
Okay, so they'll collectively make decision, not like a director saying we're going to invest it in this.
Well, so the answer to your question is, yeah, you could have an executive director or the director say, no, this is what we're going to do. And the second that happens, your phone's going to start ringing off the hook because all these 13 advisors that are on here, if anything happens that's contrary to the overall consensus, you're going to hear about it immediately. And all I have to point to is what's happened with the Wireless Communication Commission over the last 15 years. That's exactly how that's worked. It's worked very well. And we wanted to make sure that's why we have that advisory board there. And we want to make sure that it works as similar to how the MISWIN system worked. And that has been a wildly successful program.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
May I ask one question, Mr. Chairman? I think I know the answer to this, but as I've looked again in my areas, currently counties, I don't know if they all do, but my counties run a deficit on their 911 service. In other words, they've got to come out of their general budget to offset that. It's my understanding on the other side of the implementation of this with the model you prescribed, the deficit will either be less or net zero. So the county budgets should be more in the black as a result of following this. Is that a correct assumption?
I don't know if that's a correct assumption because everybody's going to do it differently. And what we're trying to do, and I'll tell you, the numbers are all over the board on what amount of service fee is collected. It's my understanding based on some research that I've done that we're right there in the middle. What's different and why you have to be very careful is that you have some states that do like $1.35 or $1.40. But you have the state that provides a whole lot of general fund support or support through other budgets towards these purposes. So there's not a need. The way the state of Mississippi has done this is said it's all locals. The counties have to pay for it. So this increase in the service fee is to try to help offset that. I'm sure that you're going to have some counties that are going to be resistant to collapsing or to consolidation, and they're going to want to do it on their own. That's going to be a very expensive proposition. We're designing this to pattern it after others, where if there is proper efficiencies that are gained through consolidation, that it would be less of a draw on the general fund dollars within the local counties.
It just seems that with the advent of consolidation and the revenue stream as prescribed, it could be better on the county budgets.
Absolutely, it will be.
Thank you,
No
Mr.
doubt.
Chairman.
Title sufficient to pass committee sub.
The motion has been title sufficient to pass committee sub. All those in favor? Any opposed? Can I have another motion? Thank you.
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
Hope that worked out. I hope that was.